You're standing in the Mongolian steppe, 2004. Archaeologists have just opened a tomb sealed for 800 years. Inside, they find weapons, military regalia, administrative seals, the burial of a Mongol commander who ruled vast territories. But the skeleton isn't male. It's female. And the tomb inscription, barely legible after centuries, contains a name that doesn't appear in any Chinese historical record. A name that was deliberately erased. A daughter of Genghis Khan who commanded armies, governed kingdoms, and shaped the largest land empire in human history. Yet for 800 years, she didn't exist. Not in the chronicles. Not in the histories. Not in the records written by the very empire she helped build. You think you know Genghis Khan's legacy. You've heard of his sons, Joki, Shugatai, Ogedai, Talyui. The princes who inherited the empire. But what about his daughters? Alakai Beki, who ruled the Ongut. Chechikan, who commanded the Oirat Confederacy. Tumalun, who governed conquered Persian territories. Women who wielded power equal to their brothers. History erased them. Systematically. Deliberately. For 8 centuries. Until archaeologists started digging. Until they found the tombs. The military equipment. The administrative records. The evidence that Chinese historians worked for centuries to bury. This isn't a story about forgotten women. This is a story about historical genocide. The deliberate destruction of evidence. The systematic rewriting of powerful female rulers as powerless concubines. And the archaeological discoveries that prove everything we were taught about the Mongol Empire is a lie. If you want history that exposes how power rewrites the past, subscribe. This channel exists to reveal the mechanisms of historical erasure and the evidence that survived. Let me show you what really happened to Genghis Khan's daughters. And why Chinese historians needed 800 years to make you forget they existed. Genghis Khan died in 1227. Every history textbook tells you what happened next. His sons divided the empire. Ogedai became Great Khan. Shugatai ruled Central Asia. Talyui's descendants would create the Yuan dynasty in China and the Ilkhanate in Persia. The sons inherited everything. Except that's not what actually happened. Let me show you what Mongol records, written before Chinese historians got their hands on them, actually say. The secret history of the Mongols, written around 1240 in the Mongolian language, describes Genghis Khan's distribution of power. To his sons, he gave armies to expand the empire. To his daughters, he gave kingdoms to rule. Read that again. Sons received mobile military forces. Daughters received stable territorial governance. Why? Because Genghis Khan understood something fundamental about empire. Conquest and administration require different skills. His sons were warriors. Brutal. Effective in battle. But governance required diplomacy, alliance building, economic management, multi-generational planning. His daughters were educated in administration, languages, diplomacy, and strategic marriage alliances. They were trained to rule. And rule they did. Alakai Beki, born approximately 1191. Given control of the Ongut Confederation, a critical buffer state between Mongolia and China. She ruled for over 30 years, commanding military forces, collecting taxes, administering justice. Chechikan, born approximately 1186. Governed the Oirat people in western Mongolia. Her territory controlled crucial trade routes between Central Asia and China. Tumulun, birth date unknown. Administered Persian territories after the Western conquests. Managed one of the wealthiest regions in the empire. These weren't ceremonial positions. These women commanded armies. Collected tribute. Made life and death decisions over millions of people. The evidence is overwhelming. Mongolian chronicles. Persian sources. Archaeological discoveries. All confirm the same thing. Genghis Khan's daughters were rulers equal to his sons. So why have you never heard of them? The erasure started with Kublai Khan. When Kublai conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty in 1271, he faced a problem. He was ruling a Confucian society with deeply entrenched beliefs about gender hierarchy. Confucian ideology was explicit: women don't rule. Women don't command armies. Women don't govern territories. Women belong in the inner chambers, producing sons, managing households. But the Mongol Empire had been built by women who did exactly those things. This was a propaganda crisis. Kublai's solution: commission official histories that would correct Mongol governance to fit Chinese expectations. Between 1280 and 1370, the Yuan dynasty produced several official histories. The Yuan Shi, History of Yuan, the official dynastic history compiled in 1370. For 700 years, the Chinese version was the only version. Then archaeologists started finding the tombs. Discovery 1, the Tomb of Alakai Beki, 2004. Location, Inner Mongolia, near the former Onggud capital. Contents, a female skeleton dressed in military armor. Weapons buried alongside her, a composite bow, arrows, a sword. Administrative seals showing her authority over taxation and justice. Inscription identifying her as Alakai Beki, daughter of Genghis Khan, ruler of the Onggud. The burial was identical to male Mongol commanders. Same military honors. Same administrative symbols. Same power. Discovery 2, the Women Commanders Cemetery, 2011. Location, Western Mongolia, former Oirat territory. Contents, multiple female burials with military equipment. Horse gear indicating cavalry command. Tablets describing their ranks in Mongol military structure. Forensic analysis of the skeletons, injuries consistent with combat. Bone stress patterns indicating lifelong horseback riding and archery training. These weren't women married to commanders. These were women who commanded. Discovery 3, Persian Administrative Records, 2015 translation. Location, Tabriz Archives, Iran. Contents, administrative documents from the Ilkhanate period showing women as tax collectors, regional governors, and military logistical officers. One document specifically mentions Tumulun, daughter of the Great Khan, administrator of the Persian taxation system. The same woman Chinese histories never mentioned at all. The archaeological evidence is clear: Genghis Khan's daughters weren't symbolic figures. They were operational rulers with military and administrative power equal to their brothers. Chinese historians spent 700 years erasing that reality. Now we need to understand why. To understand the erasure, you have to understand Confucian historical methodology. Chinese dynastic histories weren't just recording events. They were moral instruction manuals. Every dynasty commissioned official histories of the previous dynasty to demonstrate why the previous dynasty fell, moral failure. Why the new dynasty deserved the mandate of heaven, moral superiority. What proper governance looks like, Confucian hierarchy. When the Ming dynasty overthrew the Yuan dynasty in 1368, they immediately commissioned the Yuan Shi, the official history of Mongol rule. The Ming historians had a problem. How do you explain why the Mongols, who violated every Confucian principle including female rulers, managed to conquer the largest empire in history? Their solution: rewrite Mongol governance to look more Confucian. Women who ruled became women who influenced their husbands. Military commanders became beautiful consorts. Administrative power became domestic virtue. Let me show you a specific example. The Secret History of the Mongols, written 1240, Mongolian source, says about Alakai Beki. She commanded the Onggud forces, collected tribute from subject peoples, and administered justice according to Mongol law. Her warriors numbered 10,000 horsemen. The Yuan Shi, written 1370, Chinese source, says about Alakai Beki. She married the Onggud prince and was known for her virtue and beauty. She managed the household well and bore sons. Same woman. Completely different description. One source describes a military commander with 10,000 troops. The other describes a housewife known for beauty. Which version did the world believe for 700 years? The Chinese one. Because the Chinese histories were more widely distributed, translated into more languages, and treated as authoritative. The Mongolian sources, dismissed as primitive or unreliable. The truth was buried under centuries of Confucian revisionism. But the erasure wasn't just rewriting. It was destruction. Archaeological evidence suggests systematic elimination of records mentioning Mongol women's power. Evidence point 1: the missing military records. Mongol military administration was meticulous. Every unit, every commander, every campaign was documented. Chinese sources frequently reference these records when describing male commanders. According to military records, the campaign documents show. But when describing the territories we know were governed by Genghis Khan's daughters, suddenly the records don't exist or are lost. Alakai Beki ruled the Onggud for 30 years. That should generate thousands of administrative documents. Tax records. Military orders. Legal judgments. Chinese histories claim these records were destroyed during transitions of power. Except the records from male-governed territories during the same period survive just fine. The destruction was selective. Evidence point 2: the tomb desecrations. Several tombs identified as belonging to high-ranking Mongol women show signs of deliberate desecration during the Ming dynasty period. Archaeologists have found inscriptions deliberately chiseled away. Military equipment removed, but burial goods left behind, ruling out simple robbery. Grave markers destroyed or replaced. One tomb near the former Onggud capital shows clear evidence. The original stone inscription was removed and replaced with a Ming-era marker describing the occupant as wife of an Onggud nobleman. But soil analysis shows the original marker described her as a military governor appointed by Genghis Khan. Someone went to great effort, not to rob the tomb, but to erase her identity. Evidence point 3: the Persian Translation Project. In the 1370s to 1380s, Ming dynasty scholars commissioned Chinese translations of Persian histories of the Mongol Empire. Comparison between the original Persian texts and the Chinese translations reveals systematic alterations. Persian text, Tumulan, daughter of Genghis Khan, governed the western territories. Chinese translation, a daughter of Genghis Khan lived in the western territories. Governed, became, lived in. This wasn't translation error. This was ideological editing. Now we need to understand why Genghis Khan empowered his daughters in the first place. This wasn't about progressive gender politics. This was strategic brilliance. The Mongol expansion strategy had a critical vulnerability. How do you control conquered territories while your armies keep moving? If you leave male relatives to govern, they might build independent power bases and rebel. This happened repeatedly in other empires. If you leave generals to govern, they have the military force to declare independence. Genghis Khan's solution: leave your daughters to govern. Married to local rulers, but maintaining Mongol authority. Here's how it worked. Step 1. Conquer a strategic territory. Step 2. Identify the most powerful local ruler who survived the conquest. Step 3. Marry one of Genghis Khan's daughters to that ruler. Step 4. The daughter becomes the actual administrator of the territory. The local ruler gets to maintain his title and status. But real power, tax collection, military command, judicial authority, rests with the Khan's daughter. This accomplished several things. Local populations accepted rule by their own leader, technically. The Khan's daughter ensured loyalty to the Mongol Empire. The son-in-law couldn't rebel without losing his wife's support and the Mongol army backing her. If the son-in-law died, the daughter remained in power. It was a governance system designed to prevent rebellion while maintaining central control. And the archaeological evidence proves it worked. Analysis of burial sites shows that when these son-in-law rulers died, their wives, the Khan's daughters, didn't lose power. They continued ruling. Often for decades. Alakai Beki ruled the Onggud through 3 husbands. Each one was technically the ruler, but the administrative seals, the military command symbols, the judicial authority, all belonged to her. This wasn't marriage. This was power projection through female administrators. Western Mongolia. An archaeological team makes a discovery that shocks the historical community. A tomb complex containing multiple burials. The central burial, a woman in her 60s, buried with full military honors. But it's the inscription that changes everything. Here lies Chechikan, daughter of Temujin, Genghis Khan, commander of the Western forces, administrator of the Oirat Confederation. She led 47 campaigns. She governed for 40 years. She died in battle defending her people. Died in battle. At age 60-something. Forensic analysis of the skeleton confirms it, trauma consistent with combat wounds. A blade injury to her left shoulder. Arrow damage to her ribs. She didn't die peacefully in bed. She died fighting. Carbon dating places her death around the 1240s. This tomb should be world news. A daughter of Genghis Khan who commanded armies for 40 years and died in combat. Instead, most people still don't know she existed. Why? Because acknowledging her requires rewriting everything we've been taught about the Mongol Empire. About gender in medieval societies. About how history gets written. The erasure of Genghis Khan's daughters isn't unique. It's a pattern that appears throughout history whenever female power challenges patriarchal historical narratives. Example 1, Hatshepsut of Egypt. Female pharaoh who ruled for 22 years, 1479 to 1458 BCE. After her death, her successor systematically erased her name from monuments, destroyed her statues, removed her from king lists. It took archaeologists until the 19th century to prove she existed. Example 2, the Trung sisters of Vietnam. Led a rebellion against Chinese rule in 40 CE. Commanded armies of 80,000. Ruled independently for 3 years. Chinese histories reduced them to footnotes, emphasized their eventual defeat, downplayed their military success. Example 3, Queen Nzinga of Ndongo. 17th-century African ruler who fought Portuguese colonization for 40 years. Led armies personally. European colonial histories described her as a savage and concubine, erasing her military and diplomatic achievements. The pattern is consistent. Women wield significant power. Patriarchal historians minimize or erase that power. Archaeological evidence eventually reveals the truth. Resistance to accepting the evidence remains strong. We're watching this pattern with Genghis Khan's daughters in real time. The archaeological evidence has been accumulating since 2004. Tomb after tomb. Document after document. Yet most history textbooks still don't mention them. Why? Acknowledging Genghis Khan's daughters requires admitting something uncomfortable. Our understanding of medieval history is based on sources written by people with ideological agendas. Chinese historians weren't neutral observers. They were active participants in erasing evidence that contradicted Confucian gender ideology. And we, modern historians, educators, writers, repeated their narratives for centuries without questioning them. The resistance to incorporating new archaeological evidence isn't just academic stubbornness. It's cognitive dissonance. If we admit that Genghis Khan's daughters commanded armies and governed territories, we have to ask: what else did Chinese historians falsify? How many other powerful women were erased? How much of medieval history is ideological fiction? These questions threaten established narratives. In 2018, a prominent medieval historian published a paper incorporating the archaeological evidence about Mongol women rulers. The response from some colleagues, accusations of revisionism, claims that he was exaggerating the evidence, demands for more proof. Despite multiple tomb excavations. Despite administrative records. Despite forensic analysis. The resistance isn't about lack of evidence. It's about unwillingness to accept what the evidence proves. So why does this matter? Because history isn't just about the past. It's about what we believe is possible. For 800 years, the erasure of Genghis Khan's daughters sent a message: women don't command armies. Women don't govern empires. Women don't wield that kind of power. And that message shaped what people believed women were capable of. But the truth is different. Women commanded the Mongol armies. Women governed Mongol territories. Women built and maintained the largest land empire in human history. Not despite being women. Not as exceptions. But as integral parts of the Mongol power structure. Genghis Khan didn't empower his daughters because he was progressive. He did it because it worked. Female administrators were effective. Strategic marriages maintained loyalty. Governing through daughters prevented rebellions. The Mongol Empire succeeded partly because it used talented people regardless of gender. And Chinese historians spent 800 years erasing that reality because it contradicted their ideology. Pause. Stand in Mongolia today. Visit the tomb of Chechikan. See the weapons she was buried with. Read the inscription describing her 47 campaigns. She existed. She ruled. She fought. She mattered. And for 800 years, history pretended she didn't. The archaeological evidence is undeniable now. The tombs are open. The inscriptions are translated. The truth is available. But it only matters if we choose to accept it. If we choose to rewrite the textbooks. Update the curricula. Tell the complete story of the Mongol Empire, including the women who built it. Subscribe if you believe historical truth matters more than comfortable narratives. Leave a comment. Why do you think it took 800 years for this evidence to be acknowledged? Because the real question isn't why Chinese historians erased Genghis Khan's daughters. It's why we kept believing the erasure long after the evidence proved otherwise. How many other women rulers are still buried, literally and figuratively, waiting for archaeologists to prove they existed? And how many more centuries will we wait before we stop letting patriarchal historians determine whose history gets told?